Hey, what's up, movie friends? Welcome back to Raiders of the Lost podcast. I'm Anthony.
And I'm James, and today we're going to be doing a musician episode on Whiplash and La La Land, which were both directed by Damien Chazelle. And we also have a special guest today. We have an actual jazz drummer who's going to give us his expertise and experience and insight into the world of jazz drumming in regards to Whiplash and the authenticity of the film, and if it's like movie fluff in terms of like the bloody hands and the intense and insane instructors. And so we're going to get like a real life experience of that world.
Both of these films are really fantastic. Whiplash was an excellent debut for Damien Chazelle, and La La Land obviously won a lot of awards and was widely loved by people around the world. I think it made $480 million or something, so it was a big hit. And he showed his technical prowess and his real talent for directing. He uses a lot of old techniques and brings it into the contemporary film world, and he shoots on film. And his films look fantastic, and the stories are always really interesting and very good conflicts. And if you watch Damien Chazelle movies, every single one of his movies, they end the same way with two characters looking at each other. Same thing with Whiplash at the final show, and then with La La Land at the jazz club. And then in First Man, the two of them looking at each other through the glass.
Yeah, so I would say that Damien has a few main signatures as a filmmaker in terms of relatable characters and interesting characters, terrific music by Justin Hurwitz, and a powerfully intense ending like you just brought up. And it seems to have his movies like have almost like two climaxes in a way at the end. Like there's like the subtle, this movie could end like this sort of way, but then it always spends another final epilogue or a final act with a new ending.
I think it's he has longer third acts than usual is what it is. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but that first kind of climax sets up the final climax, which always just ends in the final shot, like you just said, of the two characters looking at each other. And his films also open up in sort of like overtures, if you want to call them that. And like when we're talking about Whiplash specifically, I love the way he opens this film because you could take like a normal any other filmmaker, any other screenwriter, and they'd probably, here's this new student going to a music school, and here's him walking to class or whatever. You can see a typical way they do it. But the way he does it is that great drum roll with black, and then he cuts to Andrew drumming, and then he shows you both of these main characters within a minute, and you kind of get great characterization of both of them. And then the same thing with La La Land, we have that great opening dance monologue scene.
All three of his films, even First Man, his characters seem to always be centered upon becoming obsessive about a goal. Because in Whiplash, Andrew becomes obsessive about drumming to become as good as he possibly can. And in La La Land, both Mia and Seb decide that they both have to commit completely to both of their individual passions to find their own success, which ends up being the reason why they can't be together. And then in First Man, Neil Armstrong becomes obsessive about making it to the moon successfully. So I think that he has a passion for people who have a passion. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. And he won the Oscar for Best Director for La La Land, which was a massive accomplishment for someone at the age of 31 at the time, which is insane. And again, we've talked about directors like Martin Scorsese, who didn't win a Best Director Oscar until The Departed, like 40 years into his career.
Fucking A, Marty.
That guy's made like 80 movies, and it took that long to get an Oscar.
He's made like 5 masterpieces.
And then Chazelle's made 2 movies, which is, I mean, not saying that La La Land is not a great directing performance, but then, I mean, again, Chris Nolan didn't even get a nomination until Dunkirk. So I think that speaks volumes to how receptive people were to the film La La Land and how much everyone loved it. The best way to support Raiders of the Lost podcast is to become a patron. Go to patreon.com/Raiders of the Lost podcast and become a $2, $5, or $10 patron. Every tier gets specific perks like personalized messages, personalized videos, sneak peeks at upcoming episodes, and top tier patrons get a monthly shout out on the podcast the first week of every month. Let's go.
And also, people love musicals, especially film people, especially theater people, obviously. And the Academy really adores musicals. So oftentimes, it's rare to have a good musical not get nominated for anything. It's just, it's a classical part of film history, musicals. And so whenever they're made, because they're pretty rare nowadays, so whenever they are made, people adore them. And this is a really good one. And what I like about this musical is that I'm not the biggest musical fan, but there are a bunch that I enjoy, but I don't watch all of them. And this musical is a lot different because generally, most musicals are like different period setting, or they have lavish sets and outfits and costuming, and they're just very otherworldly in a lot of ways. But this musical is very relatable because it's just two people in LA, contemporary LA, and so the sets aren't extravagant. The costuming is very much what we wear, and so I think that Chazelle made the musical very relatable, especially to people who live in LA. And so I think that's why people liked it so much.
Yeah, and I think with his musical La La Land, there's a ton of music, obviously, but also so much dancing. And I think what they effectively did, just to stay on that topic, is they translate the moods and emotions of the film so well, not just with music, but with dance, with the characters too. And I think that's what makes it takes it up even further in terms of, yes, there are musicals that come out, or even just films that have pieces of a musical inside of them. Like we talk about, like maybe Hail Caesar has bits of stuff like that with those glorious sets from like the 40s and 50s Hollywood. And even, I mean, the opening of Indiana Jones in Temple of Doom, that's kind of like a musical setup, like what it used to be. That's kind of how like Hollywood used to be. Like movies used to be like this. They would all these set pieces, these dancing, tap dancing, music and everything like that. So that's what Hollywood used to be like.
Yeah, it's like not how I just said. Musicals are rare now. Back then in the 40s, 50s, musicals were probably the most common type of movie that people saw, and so people were really used to seeing musicals. That's why I think, because a lot of Academy voters are much older now, because they've been in the Academy for 40 years or so, they still have that great endearing love for musicals. So I think that's why musicals get a lot of love.
Yeah, it's like watching a Gene Kelly movie.
Yeah, whereas it's a lot harder for a sci-fi film or a horror film to get nominated for Oscars, you know what I mean? Because those are more sci-fi and horror. They've always been around, but they've only, like in the last couple of decades, really peaked and become a much more common occurrence in film.
Yeah, and Whiplash isn't a musical, but it has a ton of great jazz music, and I'm sure a lot of people never really had been exposed to jazz on that kind of level, just in your face the entire film, and obviously in the opening of the movie. And it's a really great story. And as much as Whiplash is about obsession, La La Land's probably more, yes, obsession, but also about dreams versus love, I think, because Whiplash is straight up just Andrew's trying to be the next Charlie Parker. Whereas in La La Land, both Mia and Sebastian are trying to balance that situation of, do I choose love and follow down this path, or do I choose my dream path?
Very similar ideas, but they're approached in different ways, because Mia and Seb, they don't become obsessive like Andrew, but they end up sacrificing their relationship to pursue their careers. And Andrew does the same thing, but he sacrifices everything. In a lot of ways, Andrew loses his humanity to commit completely to drumming. Like, he breaks up with his girlfriend out of nowhere, and his relationship with his father is very strained, and he's pretty much isolating himself and shutting everyone out, and just becoming obsessed with Fletcher, and trying to prove to Fletcher that he can be as good as he thinks he is. And so that becomes... So I think it's a combination of obsession for Whiplash and passion for following dreams in La La Land.
And all three characters, Andrew, Mia, and Sebastian, to me are kind of like, when I look at it, they're like in this sort of limbo where they're very talented, all three of them, in their own respective art craft. But they need to figure out how to break that ceiling to get into that not otherworldly talent, but to chase that dream and achieve their obsession. And they're all kind of stuck in that. I think it's so relatable, because a lot of artists find themselves trapped in that kind of way, where do I stay with this person? Is it going to hold me back? And whereas Andrew in Whiplash is so much more quick and non-hesitant to just cut Nicole, his girlfriend, out of his life, because he realizes she's going to stand in my way from achieving what I want, so I'm just going to cut the cord, no problems. And he doesn't even regret it until later in the film. Whereas again...
Yeah, I mean, later in the film, he asked her to see the show, and she's like, I already have a new boyfriend. Like, he doesn't understand, like, what he did to her.
Yeah, and then whereas Sebastian... He's also in a limbo, but a different kind of limbo, where he's like kind of stuck in the past. All he thinks about is these. Well, Andrew thinks about these legends too, but Sebastian's like a purist or a traditionalist with his music, and he wants to keep jazz alive and the old style of jazz alive, and that's why he ends up leaving Keith's band, because it's not for him, because it's not what he believes in. And same thing with Mia, where she's sort of in that actor-actress limbo in Los Angeles. You know, all these thousands and tens of thousands, maybe even more people here trying to pursue that dream of acting and having to deal with auditions and stuff like that. So they're all kind of in this artist limbo.
LA is filled with people who are pursuing art and trying to find success in accomplishing their dreams of whatever art form it is. I mean, obviously, lots of people trying to be actors and filmmakers and musicians and artists and LA is the place to do it. So this city is filled with hundreds of thousands of people who are going through the similar experience. And I think what Chazelle really honestly portrays in a real way in these films is rejection, because everyone faces so much rejection, especially in acting, because there's that great scene of Mia's audition, and you see Emma Stone she crushes the scene, the monologue, and she's crying, and because she's such a talented actor and she's amazing in it. And then all of a sudden, someone knocks on the door and walks into the room, and then someone walks past her again, and someone's on their phone, and she becomes like, what do I do? Like, she interrupted her amazing monologue. I know so many actors, and they put so much into their auditions, and they get rejected over and over and over again, and overlooked, and not really given any kind of like notice by casting directors and producers. And so it's a difficult life for actors because they have to put so much work in just to get rejected the next day. You know what I mean? And then the same thing with Andrew and Whiplash, where Fletcher's constantly rejecting him over and over again, telling him he's not good enough. He promotes that other drummer as a way to challenge Andrew. Andrew thinks it's a slight because he knows he's better than the other drummer, but Fletcher's always telling him he's not good enough. You're not good enough. And then in terms of Sebastian, his rejection is that no one's giving him a chance. No one wants to listen to jazz, and that's why he has to play, holiday music, and that's why he can't open his club, he thinks, because he doesn't think anyone will go. So they all face rejection in different ways in these films.
This episode of Raiders of the Lost podcast is brought to you by our friends at manscaped.com. Use our coupon code Raiders of the Lost at checkout for 20% off and free shipping year-round. Again, Raiders of the Lost for 20% off and free shipping. 2 million men are already using Manscaped products. 2 million. You got to get on this. We're on it. They've sent us their Lawnmower 3.0 groomer. This thing is like a spaceship for grooming. They've sent us their deodorants, their deodorizers, their colognes, their toe deodorant, their toe spray. So your toes are always so fresh and smell amazing after you take your socks after a long day. Their briefs are amazing. Shirts are comfortable. They're the leaders in below-the-waist grooming, and we're here to tell you that they're the best products to use for the job. Again, Raiders of the Lost at checkout for 20% off and free shipping. Fellas, get on this. Ladies, these are great gifts for the men in your life, and I guarantee they will be so excited to get something from Manscaped. Yeah, and I think what Chazelle is showing is overcoming obstacles. And of course, I think on the surface for some people, it can look like, are they promoting this toxic environment and in rejection and emotional trauma and abuse and denial and stuff like that? Or do they think that's a good thing? Is Fletcher the only way you can make the next Charlie Parker is to emotionally torment somebody like this? Or the only way you can become a great actor is to be rejected 1,000 times, and the only way to be a great musician is to be ignored for a decade? And I'm not saying that you don't need that to become a musician. I don't think that's what Chazelle is saying, but I think that what Chazelle is saying is that obstacles are the greatest tool to a human being when it comes to achieving goals. You can't achieve great goals if you're just constantly being told, oh, you're doing a great job. It's just like what Fletcher says with Jones and Charlie Parker. If Jones said, oh, great job, Charlie, that was a great performance, and then they would have never created the next Charlie Parker. So, but also, I don't think he's saying that you have to physically abuse somebody, psychologically abuse somebody to get that out of them.
That's where it's like, it's a movie, and it's a little, he ups the conflict because it's a movie to make it dramatic. Like, obviously, there aren't music teachers out there slapping their students in their faces or telling them they're going to F them like a pig. You know what I mean? That's not happening. I mean, that teacher would get fired immediately, like Fletcher ends up doing. But I think that Chazelle, he had experience with a very dominating teacher who he wasn't emotionally abusive, but he was scary. And then he also based Fletcher on a famous jazz musician named Buddy Rich, who was famous for his incredibly short temper. And he would often yell at people all the time. And so I think he put those two characters that he knew about into Fletcher. And also, yes, you need to be pushed to achieve greatness, but obviously you don't need to be emotionally tormented to achieve greatness. So, but it is a movie, and so I don't have a problem with it being a little bit unrealistic in terms of, like, obviously a music teacher isn't going to be like this, no matter how aggressive they are. They're not going to throw a chair at a student. But it's good for the movie because it keeps you invested and it keeps the conflict up. And it really puts Andrew up against this incredible antagonist, because the better the antagonist, the better the movie. We've said that many times. And so since Fletcher is such a great dominating antagonist, it makes the conflict of the story that much better. So it's kind of necessary, because if the teacher was kind of like pushy but not a psycho, it would be much less interesting of a movie. So the crazier that Fletcher is, the better the film is.
The first film we're going to go over is Whiplash, written and directed by Damien Chazelle, released in 2014. This stars Miles Teller, J.K. Simmons, and Melissa Benoist. A promising young drummer enrolls in a cutthroat music conservatory where his dreams of greatness are mentored by an instructor who will stop at nothing to realize a student's potential. This film won 3 Oscars.
This film was an excellent breakthrough for him, Chazelle, and also for Miles Teller. I mean, Miles Teller had a great few year span where he did Project X, Spectacular Now, Whiplash, and Divergent, and he really blew up. And he's a very talented actor. I think he has a bright future, and he's going to be in the new Top Gun movie, which I'm super excited about. And this film, it was visually stunning, and it's a really simple story, but Chazelle made the stakes as high as possible, and the drama is extreme, and it's really engaging, this entire film. He keeps you visually stunned. The music is fantastic.
3 Oscar wins, including J.K. Simmons winning Best Supporting Actor in a Role. He's phenomenal in this movie because you've never seen him do anything like this before. It won editing, it also won sound mixing, and it was nominated for Best Picture and Best Screenplay. And this was a movie that no one heard about, but it took like the festival circuit by storm. Like Sundance, I think it headlined that and won the Best Picture award at Sundance.
Yeah, it won the Audience Award,
which is awesome, and it got a ton of exposure. And it's an incredible film. And again, it's about a musician, but it's really not about music. It's about obsession. It's about sacrifice, adversity. It's a lot about mental health too, I think. Validation, manipulation, and again, overcoming obstacles, and kind of how far would you go to achieve the biggest dreams in your life? And I think both movies are kind of like that, but this one specific, like we talk about Andrew in this film, like how far does he go to achieve what he eventually, I think, becomes the next Charlie Parker in a way? And he ends up, isolating himself from everybody. He cuts ties with his girlfriend. He isolates his father from his life for the most part. He's constantly he condescends to other people. He's not very sociable. He's actually not a very likable character in a lot of ways. And all he cares about is the approval and validation of Fletcher.
What happens is Fletcher rubs off on him. And I think that early in the film, he realizes that he should be more like Fletcher if he wants to find success. And if he becomes more like Fletcher, Fletcher will approve of him. I think that Andrew, more than anything, aside from being a great drummer, is he's obsessed with Fletcher's approval, which he's just seeking the entire film and fighting for. Just Fletcher to acknowledge that you're good, you did a good job, which he doesn't do until the very end. And like you said, Andrew is an unlikable person, and he kind of becomes an anti-hero, you could say, and a bit of a villain, because there's that moment where at the first show, when he's still the second drummer and Tanner is the first drummer, and Tanner puts him in charge of guarding his sheet music while he uses the bathroom or something. And then Tanner gets back and the sheet music has been misplaced. And Andrew says he doesn't know what happened to it. And Chazelle didn't show it, but I definitely assume that Andrew threw out his sheet music, because Andrew memorized Whiplash, so he's able to play it from memory and Tanner can't. And so then Fletcher promotes him to play at the show. And so I think that that's an example of Andrew is willing to do whatever he can to achieve his goal, even if it means bringing other people down.
Yeah, I love that scene. I'm so glad you brought it up, because whenever I watched it, I think, did Andrew get rid of that on purpose? Did he throw it in the trash on purpose? Because he doesn't show it. Chazelle does a few things in this film where they're kind of inexplicable moments where you can assume something happened, but they don't explain it, or why did this happen? It's just kind of out of nowhere. Like obviously that, and then the sheet music disappearing. Then we're talking about the tire of the bus getting a flat tire. It's kind of like one of those other inexplicable moments. And then the car accident was another kind of just like out of nowhere moment that affects Andrew's life. And this entire movie, it's a roller coaster up and down. And every time I watch it, it reminds me more of films like The Aviator, Black Swan, I, Tonya, where these characters have these insane obsessions to their crafts. And like you said, they'll do anything to achieve those means. Did Andrew throw that sheet music away on purpose? I think it's fun to say that he did.
And in terms of this movie, it could be a very straightforward film. It could be kind of like boring in other hands, but Chazelle makes it so entertaining with conflict. And obviously, I think the most iconic scene in this movie is the rushing or dragging scene, where J.K. Simmons' character Fletcher just berates Andrew, and you're with Andrew in this moment because you're like, you can feel the panic because you see the panic with Andrew, and he doesn't know whether he's doing which one. And
Are you talking about his first time in the new classroom?
in the classroom, the rushing or dragging scene, and Fletcher is just not quite my tempo, that scene. And it's the first real interaction with Fletcher, because the first interaction with Fletcher, he seemed like a nice guy. He like said hi to Andrew outside the class, and he seemed like, oh, he seems like a pretty cool teacher. And then when he becomes extremely emotionally and verbally abusive towards Andrew in this moment, that's what raises the stakes in this film, because Fletcher becomes such a dominating figure in the film, and you can just feel the panic and the torment that Andrew's feeling, because you're in his shoes and you feel tormented by Fletcher. And I think that's the moment that really takes the audience into the film and engages them more than any other moment in the film.
I think, yeah, that too, but there's a few things that lead up to that. So before that, you talked about how in the opening of the movie, Fletcher notices Andrew playing drums and he sees something. I think this moment shows a lot, because Chazelle is showing you that obviously Andrew's a talented drummer, and Fletcher, you can see the look in his eyes. He's like, this guy's got something, but he doesn't want to tell him yet.
Yeah.
And he like leaves the room abruptly while he's playing. And it's that fun back and forth. It's like, why'd you stop playing? And your response to me asking you why you stopped playing is you play again. So it's actually really funny. We get great characterization, but Fletcher is a character that we're constantly learning new things about and more interesting in with him, or he gets more villainous. And before the rushing or dragging thing, I thought you said Russian dragon. I was like, Russian dragon scene. He berates the is it a
Tanner?
No, not the drummer.
Oh, sorry.
So he berates the brass player. So he's like, there's someone out of tune here, and this is before Andrew's on the drums. Like, someone's out of tune here. So he goes through everybody, and he finds this one person who he asked him. This kid's about to cry. He's got tears in his eyes. He's like, were you out of tune? And he's like, yes. And so he's like, get the hell out of my classroom, basically, but in a lot worse way. But the thing is, when he leaves the room, he says, you were the one that was out of tune. But because he didn't know, that's just as bad. And to him, anyone that is out of tune or does something wrong, to him, it's a personal sabotage on his band. He constantly calls the classroom my band. If you're going to sabotage my band, you're going to get out of here. And then that's kind of like the first time we see what Fletcher's really like, because like you said, before the class starts,
Seems cool.
like, he puts his arm on the wall. He's like, hey man, just have fun out there.
Yeah.
Oh, cool, man. And then he asks Andrew personal questions about his life, like where are you from? Are your parents musicians? And that's because the entire film, Fletcher, his entire goal is he sees potential in Andrew, but he wants to get everything out of Andrew that he possibly can. He wants to create the next Charlie Parker. That's what Fletcher's entire desire in life is, to create the next great Charlie Parker musician.
Yeah, he alludes to this at the end when they have that drink at that bar, where we learn that's Fletcher's goal, is to create a great musician.
Yeah, he says that everyone at Schaefer didn't understand what he was doing. He's a teacher, but that's not really why he's there. And he learns this new information about Andrew in his life to use it to attack him. So this entire film, he's going back and forth with either praising Andrew or attacking him, or having Connolly come take his place, or having Andrew go back, or then having Tanner come back. And he's constantly, all these musicians really mean nothing to him, because they're all a means to get to Andrew and to get Andrew's potential out.
Yeah, I think he definitely sees that potential initially, like you said. And so everything that happens is all manipulation by Fletcher, because first of all, he's obsessed with perfection in terms of his band being perfect, because he is also a fan of these icons from the past. He wants to create the next icon. He wants to be able to say, I created Andrew, what's his last name? You know what I mean? And so I think that Fletcher has spent decades trying to find the next great person. And I'm sure there are so many great musicians that he's encountered and taught, and they never took to his method. And they probably became weak around him, and he probably scared them off and really emotionally disturbed them. But with Andrew, he finally has found someone who will take all the shit, and he'll take everything that Fletcher does to him, and he'll put up with it and still try his best to seek Fletcher's approval and to try and pursue that perfection that Fletcher wants from him. And so with Andrew, he found his perfect student in a lot of ways. This episode is sponsored by movieposters.com. Use our special coupon code Raiders15 to get 15% off your order today. If you're looking at our set on YouTube, we hope you're watching it on YouTube because it's a much better experience.
And I have a haircut now.
Yeah, it looks good. We have all these great posters that movieposters.com sent us. These are high quality. The printing is the best you can do. They have all sorts of sizes, framing, backlighting, whatever you want. Movieposters.com can handle it. If you love movies, if you love TV shows, if you're passionate about the media arts, there's no better way to express that passion than to decorate your home and your bedroom with movie posters and TV posters. And so if you want to do that, you got to go to movieposters.com. It's the best place to get your movie posters online. Use our coupon code Raiders15 to get 15% off your order today. Again, Raiders15 at movieposters.com.
And again, we're not condoning emotional abuse or trauma. I don't think Chazelle is condoning emotional abuse or trauma to create the next Charlie Parker. Obviously, you don't need to do this to create the next great musician. This is, again, just a story, and this is the character of Fletcher. He runs this like sort of militaristic world in this classroom, and you can tell as soon as Andrew's in the first time in that classroom. Well, there's a great scene where before he gets promoted to that class, he walks by it in the hallway, and it's like this. His normal classroom, it's like gray and dull and like crappy seats, but he walks by this room and it's got like gold lighting.
Yeah, really warm lighting.
It's like I want to be in there. Like my whole goal is to be in there with Fletcher. And then when he's finally in there, everyone in the classroom, as soon as Fletcher walks in, they stand up like it's a drill sergeant, and they sit down, and then for a couple of beats, like maybe a whole minute, Fletcher's just walking around the class looking at everybody, and every single musician, no matter how long they've been in that classroom or how many classes they've been there for, they're looking down because it looks like Fletcher does this to every one of his musicians. He berates them to try to get the best out of them. It seems like none of them want to be picked on that day in class. And as soon as like someone gets chosen, they kind of are more relaxed and they're kind of giggling in the background at what's going on. And I think it's a great show of this character Fletcher because I suffice to say that he's not so much a villain. He's a villain for sure, but he does have intentions of greatness.
Yeah, he has good intentions, but he just carries out his actions in a poor way, in a questionable way. And I think that Fletcher and Andrew are a lot alike, even if Andrew doesn't want to admit it, because just like Fletcher seems to be someone who has also sacrificed a normal life to pursue greatness. Because there's actually a shot that they cut from the film of Fletcher where he's sitting alone in an apartment, like a darkly lit apartment. He's just sitting at a table quietly. And they cut it from the film because they didn't want to take away Andrew's perspective, because the whole film is Andrew's perspective. And so they felt like that took away from his viewpoint. So we don't need to show Fletcher on his own. But that showed that Fletcher is alone in his life. And because of his relentless pursuit of perfection and greatness, he has nothing else in his life. And that's what's happening to Andrew. He's shutting everyone out. He's eliminating every connection he has to pursue greatness. And so I think that both of these people, their obsession has caused them to isolate themselves from the rest of the world.
Yeah, and I think there are two instances in this film where Chazelle shows you brief glimpses of Fletcher that he has a life outside of this classroom and outside of these students and performances. And one of the scenes is when Andrew, after he has the core drumming part and he loses it to Connolly, and he like busts into Fletcher's office and he's like freaking out on Fletcher, and Fletcher seems clearly upset because he was just on the phone and hung up on the phone. And this is before we find out that Sean Casey died, which he ends up lying about in the next classroom, saying that he died in a car accident, but really he died by hanging himself. And then we have another scene where after Andrew basically is a witness to take down Fletcher, and he stumbles upon him in that jazz club, and we see Fletcher outside of the classroom, and he's playing piano with a jazz quartet, and he's playing a very like somber, melancholy, beautiful song, and it's the exact antithesis to his personality in the classroom.
Yeah, exactly. And so it shows that with music, he's an artist, you know what I mean? But in terms of how he treats other people, he's a monster. And I don't think that I think it's a thing of like, just because if someone's a horrible person in real life, can you appreciate their art in a lot of ways? And that's what Fletcher is like. And then you see that reveal in the jazz club. But what happens is Fletcher and Andrew, it does reach that breaking point where when he's finally taken out, he's fired from the band because Andrew attacks him at the performance for replacing him.
He's kicked out Schaefer.
He just kicked out Schaefer. That was the boiling point for Andrew. Like, that could be the end of the movie, but like you said, there's an extended final act of Chazelle's films where when he stumbles upon Fletcher in the jazz club, it's like such a crazy coincidence. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And it sets up the climax of the film. And so that's a brilliant way where you think the movie is ending and going in a certain trajectory, and then all of a sudden it just takes a 180 and they're back together in a lot of ways. So I thought it was a real fun way to show something completely unexpected with the story.
Yeah, it's such an interesting back and forth between these two characters because, again, every single thing that Fletcher does in this film to Andrew is done on purpose, and it's all done to, in Fletcher's eyes, bring the most potential out of him and try to create that next Charlie Parker. Like, for example, the first thing he does to Andrew is he tells him the wrong time to be at the classroom by 3 hours on purpose so that Andrew's sitting there for 3 hours by himself at his drum kit waiting for the class to start. He didn't do that by accident. He did that on purpose. That's the first instance of messing with him. And I mean, there are countless examples of that too, but even...
It's also a test.
Yeah, again, it's a test, but even what he does to him at the end, like, after he sees him in the jazz club, and then Fletcher invites him to be.
They have a drink together, and they seem like two guys talking.
Yeah. And then he invites him to be the drummer for his performance because he's headlining the JVC Jazz Festival. And you think, oh, maybe Fletcher wanted to do this on purpose, but really we find out that this is a setup by Fletcher to basically destroy Andrew's career or make Andrew's career. I think for both of them, this is a make or break it moment because before they go onto stage, Fletcher turns to his band. He's like, this is the crowd that can either make your career or end it because these people will not forget. And I think what Fletcher's doing is this is the moment for Andrew. Either you're going to be next Charlie Parker or you're not. This is your final test because when he goes out there and he doesn't have the right music and he plays a different song, Fletcher goes up to him. He's like, I knew you didn't. I guess you don't have it. But really, this is, again, another test because Andrew leaves the stage to go hug his dad. Then he comes back on stage and he destroys it because this is what Fletcher was trying to do the entire film, was to get this performance out of him.
Yeah, I agree with you, but I also slightly disagree. I don't think that Fletcher had Andrew on with the intention of possibly seeing the greatness come out of him. I think his intention was all nefarious to get him to ruin his life because Andrew ruined his life by testifying anonymously and getting him fired from Schaefer. And so I think that Fletcher, he set Andrew up to fail, and I think I think Fletcher had the intention that he knew Andrew was going to fail, but then. So I don't think he was like, oh, I'm going to see if this is a final test, because I don't think Fletcher's the kind of person who would ever jeopardize his own performance, but I felt that he wanted revenge so badly, he managed to do it. I think that by accident, this was the moment where it finally allowed Andrew to break through and become great. And so I think that Fletcher, because in that scene, I feel like Fletcher is surprised, obviously, when Andrew keeps playing, like that was unintentional. And then the great solo happens. And so I think Fletcher, it wasn't his plan to test him. I think it was his plan to just destroy him. And then Andrew turned the tables on him, surprisingly.
I mean, you're probably right. I think it's probably maybe a little bit of both because, of course, he was trying to destroy his career, which is why he says that before they go perform.
Yeah.
But I think that also once Andrew starts playing the Whiplash song by himself, I think this is when Fletcher realizes that maybe this is what it took, actually. Maybe now I'm going to get what I've always wanted out of this guy. Maybe you're right. He probably was just only wanted failure in his mind. But then he realizes that this is how I created this. Maybe this is how far I had to go.
Yeah, and that it's a great moment because then when he recognizes what Andrew's doing and how great he's playing, then he gets excited.
Yeah.
And he gets the band involved. And
takes his jacket off.
Yeah, he takes his jacket off and he's like, it's like he's like turned on by it. You know what I mean? Like his juices are flowing. Like Fletcher is like in it. And then you can see that's such a great characterization because that's all he cares about is great music. And then once Andrew starts playing incredibly well, he is just so jazzed about it. He's juiced about it. And the ending of this film is so brilliant because it cuts at right before the end. Like right before they end the song, and Fletcher and Andrew are staring at each other. It's that, like we talked about with Chazelle, how he ends his movies. And it's right before the finale of the song. And the movie cuts, and it's exciting and still exhilarating. It's like, oh, Andrew did it. and him and Fletcher, they're like they're connected now, and it's like it seems like it's a happy ending, but I think it's gonna be, I think it's actually a sad ending because Andrew has sacrificed his humanity to get to this point. He's completely shut everyone off. He's destroyed his relationships, and he's committed to being Fletcher's protege now. And also, you have to imagine that after this moment, he and Fletcher are going to be working together probably for a while, indefinitely also. So Fletcher's not someone you want to connect yourself to, I don't think. He's such a toxic person. And also, it also shows that Andrew is going to end up like Fletcher, a great musician and a great artist, but he's going to be alone, just like Fletcher alone in his apartment. So I think it kind of tricks you. It seems like it's a amazing, happy ending, but ultimately, I think that Andrew's life going forward is not going to be a good life.
I disagree because, like I said, before they go onto stage, Fletcher explains that this crowd, you could have a great performance and you're going to get signed. And I think in my eyes that Andrew does two things. The great performance makes this crowd realize that he's an incredible talent. And I think he eventually probably signs with somebody in that audience or with some kind of musical company, meaning that he parts ties with Fletcher. And I think he reconciles with his father because before this, his father comes back into his life and he convinces his son to take Fletcher down. And, we have those nice moments where, he's always going to the movies with his father while he's in school. And now they're having a movie and is a crappy apartment by himself. And then he's letting his father back into his life. And that's when Fletcher embarrasses him on stage, he goes and hugs his father and then he goes back. So I think he's starting to reconcile his relationships in his life. And I think he's also put on this great performance. And
but I would say, I think he watches a movie with his father because he quit. So that's why. But now, since he's going to be successful, he's going to isolate his father again.
I disagree. I think that he's found out what's important in life because that's also why he calls Nicole. He's like, I've sacrificed personal relationships in my life to be happy, but I think because he's achieved the high level talent that he's always wanted, that I think he's got that. He's starting to build relationships again. I think this is kind of not a continuing of partnership between him and Fletcher. I think this is like an ending of the road between them because this is all Fletcher wanted was to create this.
Yeah.
I think that just this performance, this musician right here was Fletcher's goal. And I think that they're just going to be done. I think Fletcher will now move on to create the next great musician because I think they're going to go separate ways personally.
Yeah, that's a good point. He's obviously going to get signed. So I guess they aren't going to be together a lot, but I just think that it shows that Andrew is going to be like Fletcher. Yeah. That's what I think. Yeah, he's going to be obsessive for the rest of his life.
We can agree to disagree.
I think it's an ambiguous ending.
I think he'll be obsessive, but also I think he's going to let people in his life more.
Yeah.
Because he's achieved it now. He's at that level.
He could be. Well, it could go either way. That's what's great about the ending. That's why it works so well.
And I also just want to go real quick back to the scene where they're in the jazz club, and you said they're having that drink together and they're having a normal conversation. And I really love Fletcher's monologue in their back and forth here because Fletcher's talking about his style in teaching and how he got taken down. And this is before he tells Andrew that he knew it was him. And he admits, his style was aggressive and abusive, emotionally harmful. And he tells those stories again, about Jones and the other musician where if Jones didn't throw the cymbal at Charlie, he never would have became Charlie Parker. And there are no more harmful words than in the English language than good job. But then Andrew counters, do you think you go too far? And I think this is a great example of this film. Again, it's not just about music. It's about obsession and a lot to do with mental health and psychological manipulation. And did Fletcher go too far? Absolutely. In his classrooms, he goes too far. And it's fair to say that you don't need to do that to create the next Charlie Parker. But maybe you do need to do that. Maybe you do need to do it to an extent, not throwing chairs at people and not demeaning people psychologically, but pushing somebody. And again, I think obstacles are the greatest element for human ambition. You need obstacles in life to achieve immense goals, I think.
Yeah, you need to fail. You need to fail.
Exactly.
To succeed. You have to taste failure and you need to taste rejection. And that's obviously the main theme of the movie, I think. And also the name Whiplash, it actually refers to a lot of things in the film. So the title Whiplash refers to obviously their first jazz piece in Fletcher's band. That's what it's called, Whiplash. And then also Andrew experiences whiplash when he gets into that car accident. The beating of a drum is similar to lashing of a whip, the action of it. And then Whiplash is the abuse that he suffers under Fletcher.
I think this is a phenomenal movie. It's one of the best directorial debuts I've seen probably in my life. It's really great. It deserved all the recognition it got. And I'm excited to see the rest of Damien Chazelle's career because I think all his movies are fantastic.
He's going to make a silent era film.
That's pretty... Oh, the new one that's coming out?
They didn't start production yet.
Oh, they did. No. It's called Babylon.
Oh, maybe, yeah.
It's called Babylon.
Yeah.
And yeah, this is a phenomenal movie. Even if you're not a jazz fan, I think you'll become a jazz fan after you watch this movie because there's a lot of incredible music by Justin Hurwitz and great movie. Great job.
And now it's time to introduce our special guest, Forrest Mitchel. What's up, man?
Thanks so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me, man. It's good to be here.
It's good to see you. How's COVID going? And congratulations on your engagement, pal. It's awesome.
Thank you. Yeah, I know it's I've been trying to make some big adult moves, during COVID. It can be it's a tough time, but
we got a cat, so
2 actually. So
oh, nice.
Yeah. So Forrest, you're a jazz musician and drummer, and this episode's on Whiplash and La La Land. So what do you think about those 2 movies, Whiplash and La La Land, in general?
I think they're fun. Kind of definitely taking a creative license. On like the jazz world. I think Whiplash definitely like dramatizes some things a little bit, and La La Land, I don't know, I think a lot of people think of jazz as something that's still moving forward and is still, it's less about money and more about just a passion for either like maintaining this old art form or like pushing it forward. And then Whiplash, I mean, obviously it was just fun to see a jazz drummer featured as like a main character.
Yeah, because that's your whole life. So how long have you been drumming for?
Oh man, so I've been drumming since the 5th grade. So I can't even do math. I'm not a scientist.
It's like 19 years.
It's been a while. It's been a while.
Yeah, and
have you ever had a teacher or an instructor like Fletcher in Whiplash, who obviously he's dramatized and obviously no one slapped you in the face or threw a chair at you? But do you have any teachers who were intimidating towards you and that you were like intimidated by?
Personally, my drum teachers have all been super patient and just very like positive and encouraging. I think a lot of them were just happy to see young people into jazz and have an interest in jazz and want to keep it going. I would say the only times I ever felt intimidated by an instructor was like if we had like a section leader come in and work with the jazz band at school. Some of these were like some pretty old school cats that would definitely like hold a hard line and call you out if you were slipping, but it was never like any sort of threat, or I didn't feel like worried for my well-being or anything like that.
Yeah, I think it's like a relic of the past of maybe what classrooms kind of in these high-end environments were sort of like to have that like military dictator teacher kind of come in and whip everyone into shape that way.
Yeah.
And I think that in terms of jazz, I think they use it as a vehicle to tell stories in both of these movies rather than the movie being about jazz. There's great jazz music in both of these films, but I think it's more to tell the stories about the characters and their obsessions, their dreams, and their love.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, obviously the drive is always there, and a lot of it comes through competition with other musicians, trying to battle out for those like top shares, especially in school and like back in college and high school when I'm playing in big bands still. There's always that competition to try to keep an edge over the other players, but in general, it's a really like positive, or at least in my experience, it's always been a very positive. Everyone's there to have fun and just work on their craft and get better together.
And I have a question about like in the movie, Andrew constantly, he's bleeding all over his drum kit. He's got those vicious blisters that he's putting Band-Aids on. I know you've talked to me about experience with blisters, and we have a mutual friend who's a vibraphonist who has like gnarly blisters on his fingers from those mallets that he puts in between his fingers. But how realistic is that in terms of like bleeding all over your drum kit and dunking your hands in buckets of ice? How many times have you done that in your life?
Yes, so I think that's probably one of the most famous scenes that a lot of jazz musicians love to joke about, because it's so over the top intense. I would say that if you're playing hard enough and probably wrong enough to where you're bleeding on the drum set, you should stop immediately and like get your hands checked out. But in the early days of me practicing stick control, you would build some light calluses. Your fingers might be a little sore, but they build pretty quickly. And then after that, there shouldn't really be any pain. I mean, I've talked to some session drummers or touring drummers that are playing, long shows day in and day out, on long tours, and they can build some pretty gnarly blisters, but I've never had my hands bleeding except one time when I accidentally hit my own hand with the drumstick.
I think what happened in the movie is that Miles Teller, he has drumming in his history, but I think he only trained for like a couple of months before the film, so maybe he didn't build up the calluses and the strength in his hands. And I think there were scenes like that where the director just had him keep drumming for hours and hours, which would be like unrealistic. But I think they did it so long where he did start bleeding in real life.
So do you think that it's really him bleeding?
It is really him bleeding, but I think that like any other drummer would have stopped, but they just did it for the shot. I think.
I thought it was in the script, like bleeds all over drum set.
No, I think it's because like Miles Teller. I think it's because his hands weren't strong enough.
Gotcha.
When they started bleeding.
That makes sense.
And they were like, "Oh, let's put it in the movie," but then also like it's also a little unrealistic in terms of what a real drummer would go through.
Yeah, but maybe because it was happening on set, they're like, "This works for us," and they kind of just have to shoot through it.
Yeah, I think that might have been their thinking in it, but it's obviously a little extreme.
Yeah, it makes total sense. I mean, it creates great dramatic effect for sure, and it's definitely a memorable scene. I think most drummers, if they're starting to feel a lot of pain, or it's like, oh, that's actually opening up to be a cut, you're going to probably stop. But he had some crazy drive.
Yeah. And I mean, a lot of people aren't familiar with jazz, and I'm sure when they watch the movie, they think it seems realistic. But in terms of jazz, so how would you define jazz, and what does it mean to you? What's it meant to you your entire life, pursuing it and listening to it?
Oh man. Well, yeah, I mean, jazz was jazz fusion specifically was what got me into music. I don't know. Jazz is, I love it because especially when you're playing it, you're able to express yourself unlike a lot of other types of music. I mean, obviously every musician's expressing themselves when they play, but because it's based on improvisation, it's just, when you're playing live and it's all coming together, you enter this other state of being. And I think it's similar to when, people meditate or, like get in the zone, maybe in like some crazy sports situations, but it really does feel like you're in this other place and it's just flowing through you. And I think that goes with a lot of different types of music, obviously, but with jazz, with the improvisational piece, that's what drew me into it.
Well, it sounds just like, did you see Soul, Pixar's movie Soul?
I just recently saw it. Yeah.
It's just like that. So you basically described kind of like what he goes through in that movie when he goes into that other plane, because he's losing his soul in the music, which is what it sounds like jazz musicians experience, which is pretty fascinating, really cool.
Yeah, no, and just communicating with other musicians. I mean, you can sit down at a session and then have just met these musicians, and you play a piece of music, and you're learning how each other's style, and you're playing off each other, and it's just a really like powerful experience and way to communicate.
That's interesting. Is that something in the movie that you thought was kind of missing because there's so much collaboration is involved in jazz, and Andrew, the character, is very much isolated, and he doesn't even have any other friends in the bands that he plays with? So is that something you saw as I've been in lots of jazz bands, and you've probably made good friends on the collaborations? Is that something that you think the film missed out on?
Totally. I mean, and that's some of the best stories that you'll hear from musicians of the past. And some of the best experiences I've had has all been because of the relationships that you build with your bandmates. I mean, a lot of my closest friends today are friends that I made from elementary, in middle school jazz band, and have spent so many different time, so much time learning our instruments and developing our craft and listening to music, talking about music. That's like the best part.
That makes sense.
Great question. Yeah, that was awesome.
That's a great answer too. I have a question for you also. What's the best instrument?
The best instrument? Oh man. Well, I don't know. You can pop a drum beat and get a room of people dancing.
That's a good point.
It's true. It's the coolest looking instrument for sure too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And it's usually the craziest person in the band too, is the drummer.
I'm not going to disagree with that either. Although drums really suck to move around. Like if I could do it all over again, I probably would have been just like played trumpet.
Oh yeah, the amount of times I've seen you lugging your gear around is just like ridiculous.
You need a whole room for it.
Yeah, first to the gig, last to leave. The trumpet can show up super late, like hungover, like, oh, and then all right, dude, nice, that was fun, I'm out. And I'm packing all this crap up.
Oh, the sacrifice. What's the best performance you ever put on? Because Whiplash ends with that infamous climax where Andrew just lets out his greatest performance. He kind of becomes Charlie Parker in a way, which is what Fletcher's trying to drive out of him the whole film. And what's your greatest performance? And have you ever had like an instructor try to draw something out of you like very intensely?
Well, that's a really good question. It's a really hard question to answer because there's been so many magical moments over the years. One that's coming to mind because of the reference in the movie was actually the final. So in high school, I went to Berkeley High School, which has a world-renowned jazz program. And it's where my foundation in music really got built and my interest really intensified. But the instructor who was there, Charles Hamilton, kind of a legend, he retired the year that I was graduating. And in my particular year was a lot of us were in the jazz ensemble and we're all seniors about to graduate. And that summer after our senior year, we did a tour in Europe. And the final show of that tour, which was going to be the last time we were all going to play together and the last band and performance that Charles Hamilton was going to be directing, high school jazz band. The last song of the set ends with an open drum solo.
Oh, it's sick.
And I remember, yeah, exactly. I remember we were all just super locked in, and it was like nighttime. We were playing basically in a castle in Italy. And it got to the drum solo part. Everybody had killed it all night. The crowd was going crazy, and he just pointed to me for the drum solo, and he just kept pointing just basically keep going, just keep going. I can remember hearing the cymbals echoing off of like these ancient brick walls and the crowd just like cheering throughout the whole solo. And then it ending and we all end on this one huge climactic note or chord, and just how that felt, because it was such a happy moment, but also such a sad moment, intense moment, because I knew this was gonna be the last time that this group was gonna play together and like kind of an end of an era. But yeah, that was a moment where I was kind of like not conscious, but also really trying to take it in and like remember every second of what was happening.
That sounds insane.
Well, what percentage of it would you say, like, not every drum solo, but when you're playing jazz, like, of it is improvised?
I mean, a lot of it is memorized figures, either stuff that you've heard and then kind of internalized, or fills that you've practiced over time. But at a certain point, you're just throwing them all in combination in what sounds good to you, what feels right.
So it's like a bag of tricks that you have and you just throw it out there?
It's a bag of tricks, but then you get to this other place and you're doing stuff that you might have never really done before, or especially in a certain combination. And you're just like kind of riding this wave of emotion and just whatever is coming through you. You're not consciously thinking about, oh, I'm going to do this move next. You might have a general arc of how you want your solo to go, depending on where it is in the song. Is it the end? Is it in the middle? How long of a solo is it? How am I feeling that day? What kind of song is it? So you might have a general idea of how you want the overall solo arc to be, but what actually happens within that solo is different every time. And it's just a stream of consciousness, basically.
So cool. Love it. It's awesome.
I think we're good.
Thanks so much for coming on the show, Forrest Mitchel.
Awesome job.
No, thanks for having me. Great to finally make an appearance.
Yeah, I haven't seen you since COVID started.
I know it's been a while.
I know. We'll have to figure out some sort of socially distant hang.
Yeah,
and
for
sure. Miss you guys.
Next up, La La Land, written and directed again by Damien Chazelle, released in 2016. This film stars Ryan Gosling and Emma Stone. While navigating their careers in Los Angeles, a pianist and an actress fall in love while attempting to reconcile their aspirations for the future. This film won 6 Oscars, including Best Actress for Emma Stone, Best Directing for Damien Chazelle, cinematography by Linus Sandgard, music by Justin Hurwitz, original song, and production design, as well as being nominated for, I think, 8 other Oscars. So I think got almost every Oscar category nomination or win,
pretty much,
which is insane.
Yeah, La La Land it's a fantastic musical, and it's a lot of fun. It has great romance and great character development and conflict and transformation. Like we said earlier, the main theme of this movie is dreams, and everyone has a dream in a certain way. And what makes this movie so relatable for me personally and for you is because we live in LA and we're pursuing dreams, and that's what these characters are doing. And so many people in the city are doing the same thing. They're pursuing some kind of dream, and they're sacrificing, they're trying to find success with their art and their passion. And that's what these two characters are doing. And I mean, it's the ultimate LA movie in a lot of ways, because the city is filled with transplants from all over the country, and this movie follows two characters who are struggling between, should I completely commit to this passion of mine, or can I do it halfway while I also have to share time with this relationship? And I think that's something that a lot of people struggle with, because in order to achieve greatness in a lot of ways, you have to commit entirely to your craft, and you have to sacrifice. There's a saying I like. It's sacrifice the present for the future. And so to achieve greatness, you have to suffer for a short amount of time in the present, and you have to give up a lot of things. But then in the long run, you'll be happy, and you'll achieve what your goal was. And so I think these two characters are struggling with committing to that.
Yeah, I think the term is delayed gratification, where, you're sacrificing hours of your life, weekends. I mean, we work every single day, hours every day on this show, because we want to achieve greatness with this show and our futures. So I think that's one of the things that we can relate to very much with this movie and these characters is, do you have to balance your personal relationships, your hobbies, and your time, because again, in order to become great at your craft or whatever it is, you have to commit. You have to commit time to it. And it doesn't make you a bad person if you decide that you think you need to just pursue one thing at a time rather than relationships. Unlike, I think, what Andrew does in Whiplash is, a hurtful thing to Nicole, where he just cuts it off without even thinking about her, but that's what he thinks he has to do to achieve his goals.
He's very cold about it.
Yeah, and this film's a little different because both these characters, Mia and Sebastian, they try to make it work with their relationship. They try to do it at the same time, focusing on their relationship as well as their dreams and their passions, but it does end up making the relationship fall apart, especially when Sebastian gets that gig with Keith, and he's spending a lot of time away from home. He thinks it's a good decision because he can financially support both of them in their dreams. Sebastian makes a lot of decisions in this film where he puts himself up against the relationship, or without thinking about what Mia wants or what Mia thinks about these decisions. Like, Mia never wanted him to take that gig because she knew that it wasn't what he wanted in his heart. He knew that it didn't make him happy. He was miserable with that gig, despite how financially successful it made him.
He only took the gig because he overheard her talking on the phone with her mom about how she kind of like lied to her mom, saying like, yeah, he's like full-time in supporting, he has a full-time thing. She was lying to her mom to ease her mom from worry. And then Sebastian in the other room, when he heard this, that was the influence he had to join this band, because it was a steady job. And I mean, people, like, when we're in relationships, the other person can influence our decisions because we're trying to please them and we want to make them happy. And that's what Sebastian does. He takes the gig because he thinks it's what she wants for him, and so he's choosing the relationship over himself and his passion.
But also, he's not taking into account how she feels about the gig,
what she really feels.
So he thinks that he has the only kind of motive or perception of the relationship, and he's kind of in control of it in sort of a way, not complete control. But again, that's what leads to that fight in the dining room when he comes and surprises her, is they're going back and forth, and Mia says something like, "You never asked me what I thought about it."
Yeah.
Because he never did.
Yeah. She's worried that he has changed and sacrificed his passion and his love for his art form, and now he's going to be touring in a pop band for who knows how long. And this is what happens in a lot of relationships, where if things aren't properly communicated and if we're making assumptions, that's what happened in the conflict. Was Sebastian made the assumption that she wants him to have a full-time thing, and then when he had the taste of success, he thought it was a good thing, and he thought it's what she wanted for him, but he didn't realize that she just wanted him to be happy doing what he loves, even if he's broke. And that's why he says that line where, "You only loved me when I was a bum, like when I wasn't successful." And that's what he thought, but he was completely wrong because they didn't communicate that. You know what I mean?
She says something like, when have you ever cared what anyone thinks about you?
Yeah.
Which is why now that he started to take that into effect. And this is probably Emma Stone's career-defining role, and she's phenomenal in this movie. She's an incredibly talented actress. She does a terrific job dancing, singing, acting in this film. Hits so many roles, and like she plays this great character where she's like acting while acting, or auditioning as an actor, and it's really fun to see her perform in that way, which you don't see very often. And then Gosling is always great in every performance he does, but Miles Teller was originally thought of for this movie by Damien Chazelle and kind of written for him and offered to him, but Miles Teller turned it down because he wanted a lot more money. I think it only paid like $4 million.
Oh yeah, that's right.
But he wanted like 15 or something. You're like $10 million, and Damien Chazelle's like, we can't afford that. And so that's why Teller dropped out. Also, Emma Watson was offered, but she wanted more money too.
No, she did Beauty and the Beast instead.
But I think she wanted more money, right?
No, she turned it down to do Belle.
Okay, never mind. So she turned it down. But I think they both.
But I mean, she was Belle.
Yeah,
So.
yeah. I mean, it's a hard decision because I think Miles Teller definitely would have knocked this role out of the park. It seems like that character definitely fits his persona and style of acting as well.
Yeah, because he pulls off comedy really well. Like he's done like War Dogs and Project X.
Yeah.
So he can be like that charming, sarcastic, likable personality. So he definitely could have pulled it off. But
Sebastian's also brash too.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I think Gosling was perfect. And Emma Stone and Gosling have so much chemistry. This is their third film together. They were fourth?
No, third. Yeah.
Oh. This is their third film together. They did Crazy Stupid Love, Gangster Squad, and then La La Land, and so they've been a couple 3 times. It's evident they seem to have a great relationship, and they can translate it onto screen really well. And with them in all of their movies, well, except for Gangster Squad, but in Crazy Stupid Love and this, when they have their back and forth, it's like it feels like a real couple talking. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. It feels like a real relationship a lot of the time, and they feed off of each other, and their relationship obviously is the centerpiece of this film, and every relationship goes through transitions and it's ups and downs, and this film, Chazelle and his production team and cinematographer, they used colors to also depict the relationship. And so in the first act of the film, with the wardrobe and backgrounds, you'll see Mia and Sebastian are wearing primary colors. So Mia, like that scene with her girlfriends, and they have that song, the dresses they're wearing, it's a primary red, primary blue, primary yellow, and green. So all primary colors. Same thing with Sebastian, he's wearing the blue suit. And then you'll see that in the first act because the two characters aren't connected. So primary colors, they're not blended together to make other colors yet, but they're used to make other colors. Red, yellow, and blue. And so when Mia and Sebastian begin dating and they become getting connected, then the color palettes will change, where you'll see the sunset when they have that famous dance and the sunset's behind them. The sunset's a blending of primary colors because it's blue at the top and then red on the bottom, and it blends into a purple. And so you have the two primary colors blending together. You have the two characters connecting together. And then also there's the jazz club in the summer montage when she's dancing and he's playing piano, and the jazz club is lit all orange, and that's a blending of yellow and red, those two primary colors together, because they're connected. So the coloring is not a primary color. And then for the City of Stars song, when they're in the apartments, they begin singing the song at his piano, there's that green lighting pouring in through the windows, and green also is a blending of two primary colors, yellow and blue, because they're connected, they're a couple, and so the colors are connected. But then when they begin falling out of their relationship, the primary colors start coming back, and especially in the final scene in the jazz club, when Sebastian owns the jazz club, and the light in the jazz club, it's blue and red, two primary colors, the neon colored lights, because they're not connected anymore, so the primary colors are back. And so they use color as a way to also translate the stages of their relationship.
That's incredible. And then there's a lot of great music in this film. Justin Hurwitz, again, knocked this movie out of the park, and great composer. And I love the music he makes in all of his films. I love First Man too. Ryan Gosling actually plays piano in this film. No finger doubles. He does all the piano work in this movie. He spent 4 months learning how to play every day until he got it down. And what he did was, he can't read music. He had minimal experience.
It takes a long time to learn how to read music.
So what he did was he memorized the songs that he had to perform, which, is how he became so good at it. And he's a musical guy. I mean, he was in the Mickey Mouse Club as a kid.
He has a band.
We've all seen that the videos of him dancing with on stage
crazy pants
as a kid. So he was a child prodigy artist, and he got offered one of those boy band gigs like NSYNC, but turned it down to pursue acting. Yeah, he does have a cool, interesting Dead Bones band, and he's a very talented guy. He actually can sing very well too, which we get a glimpse of too. But he practiced his butt off to play piano, and he does all the songs by memory in this film.
He does that for a lot of his roles, and for example, Place Beyond the Pines, he learned how to ride the motorcycle, and he had never ridden a motorcycle before. And in that film, he does all of the riding except for like one moment of stunt driving.
The death ball thing.
Yeah, he does everything else. And the motorcycle instructor, there's this great interview where he said he had like a month to train Gosling to become a established professional rider. And in such a short amount of time, it was impossible, he thought. And the instructor said he's at a 1 starting, and so I think that with enough work, he can become a 3. But then he said by the end of the training, and by the time they started filming, he was a 7. So he's obviously a quick learner and has a knack for picking up skills pretty quickly. I think like Christian Bale's the same way, and so he's just a all-around extremely talented person, which is like he's a triple threat in this film: acting, singing, and dancing, and he's just an unbelievable talent. And there's a reason why he is one of the most beloved actors working right now.
I think he's a highly committed guy too. Like he's like almost like Tom Cruise level commitment, and like you said, Christian Bale. I don't think people see that too much.
It's because he's a private person.
Yeah, he's very personal life, but he does commit intensely to his roles, and you can see it in his performances. And I think everyone can relate to La La Land in a way. Again, chasing dreams, and this film has that like magical quality to it. It seems like a fairy tale in a lot of ways. A lot of times we're watching with the music and the dancing, the cinematography, which is phenomenal. Like one of my favorite shots I've seen in years is when the camera jumps into the pool in that musical in the beginning.
Yeah, Chazelle, like I said earlier, he adds a lot of magic surrealism, which is some stuff you'll see on theater on the stage.
Yeah,
and so other filmmakers have done it too. Like Joe Wright did it with Anna Karenina. That film,
that's a phenomenal production design.
Yeah, it's like a blending of theater with film.
And sets changing. And everything.
You're in a theater the whole time. Whereas Chazelle didn't do that, but he brought the elements of how sets can change and amazing things can happen out of nowhere on stage. Like for example, like that famous dance when they're dancing in the stars, and that final montage dance when they're both imagining what their lives could have possibly been like, and the stages are constantly changing, the wardrobe's changing, they're going through all these different environments, and it's a blending of musical theater with film musicals. And I think that's why people really adore this film, because people who love musicals, they grew up doing musicals in school, they performed in them, and they still love them. Whenever a film celebrates that, they really appreciate it.
And these characters are so interesting because, again, we talked about it earlier. Sebastian's kind of like this dinosaur. He's like stuck in the past, and all he thinks about and talks about are these legends. Like when his sister sits on that stool, he's like, "This guy, that was his stool. He sat on the stool. You can't sit on the stool," and stuff like that. And that's again why when he gets that gig with Keith, he throws it away because obviously with the fight with Mia, but also because it's destroying him inside, because he's such a purist and such a traditionalist. And Mia is a similar stuck position we talked about, where she's sort of in that actor limbo, trying to get auditions and not finding success. And I think this is very relatable for people, just like Whiplash is very relatable too. And we all have been in points in our life where we seem stuck, or we're worried we will never achieve what we have set out to achieve. And again, you said that the main theme of this film is dreams, but also I think it's love. It's dreams versus love. You know, how far will you be able to achieve? How far can you go in your pursuit of dreams if you're also in love with somebody and also spending this much time with them? And it's again about sacrifice and versus distraction. I don't mean to say distraction in a bad way, but
and like there are, I mean, it's not saying that you can't be in a relationship and find success.
Exactly, which I think is why that ending montage at the end is so powerful, because it shows you that could they have done what they did? Could they have achieved their goals while staying together? And I think that the montage at the end kind of shows it might have been possible.
I think it's just a dream, and just imagination for them, because what happens is they break up, and then there's 5 years later the final scene where Mia is a famous actor, and
we should talk about how she got the gig though.
I know I'm getting into that, and Sebastian owns his jazz club he always talked about, and we go through these transitions in life where it's like when you meet someone, maybe it's just not the right time in your life. You know what I mean? To be with them. And it could maybe work down the future. But at this moment in their lives, when they're together at first, they both realize that in order to become the complete versions of themselves that they want to be, they have to be apart in this situation. And they both pretty much tell each other that. And they both give each other like permission and keep each other in check, because first Sebastian is told by Mia that his club will be successful because he's so passionate about it, and he doesn't think anyone likes jazz. But she's like, but since you're so passionate about it, that will be infectious, and other people will like it, and they'll want to go to your club because you love it so much. And people enjoy other people who are passionate about things, and that will rub off on people, so it will be successful. And that's what he needed to hear. And then for Mia, when the casting director calls about doing the audition after seeing her one person play, Sebastian drives out to Idaho or Iowa,
one of those I states,
one of those, and to tell her about the audition that the casting director wants her to go on. And she has this problem where she's got to this point where she doesn't think she's good enough anymore. She's been rejected so many times, and she's like, who cares? Like, so what if this person wants me to audition? Like, maybe I don't have it. No one has seen anything in me for so long. Maybe it was a mistake to come out here. And then Sebastian says that she has to commit, and she has to do it because it's her dream. It's what she's always wanted to do. And so she has to try. She can't give up. And then when she does have a good audition and she's possibly up for the role, he tells her on that bench at Griffith Park, like, you have to commit to this completely in order to make it happen. And they both pretty much give each other permission in like the pep talk they needed to pursue their goals.
Yeah, and then we have the great ending of this movie. It's so powerful where Mia's made it. She's achieved her dreams. She's a successful actress. You know, she goes to the coffee shop she used to work at on set, and the girl behind the counter is like, "Oh my God, it's this actress."
It's actually the identical shot.
Yeah,
exactly the same exact framing.
And then her and her husband, they go out and they walk into that jazz club, and then she sees the sign that says Seb's, and she's like, "Oh my God!"
And she designed the sign.
Yeah, so she's the one that came up with that, which is like kind of the final cherry on the top of the ending, I think. And they sit down, and
he didn't do chicken on a stick.
Yeah. And then they make eye contact, and while he's on stage, and then we have this beautiful montage.
He plays the love theme first.
Yeah, he plays the love theme. Then they have that eye contact, and then we cut to this montage, which is basically the ending of the film, and it's a reenactment of what their lives could have been like. And I think it's debatable. Is it Mia's vision? Is it Seb's vision? Is it both of theirs? I kind of think it's Mia's vision, maybe, because she seems to be the one that comes out of the vision, the consciousness of what's happening. And but I mean, I think it can go both ways.
Practically, it's like it looks like it's her, but I think it's both of them.
Yeah. And there are a few important moments in this montage that show, could they have made it work? So in the montage, Seb kisses Mia after he gets fired at that restaurant.
Yes, yeah.
So Seb kisses Mia after he gets fired instead of angrily bumping into her at that restaurant where he gets fired for not playing Christmas music. Seb also says no to Keith's offer at the bar to come join his band.
It's actually pretty funny. He's like, "Hey, get out of here."
Seb doesn't miss Mia's one-person play, which is a very important part. And the shot's hilarious where Gosling's the first one up, and he's like clapping vigorously. And then they stay together after Mia auditions. Is that beautiful silhouette black and white shot of her getting the audition. They hug, and then he stays with her, and they stay together, and he goes to Paris with her. And then we have this new kind of reality of what could have happened if these things happen. And Mia and Seb get married. They have like those fake home videos. They have a child. And they go to that club in Paris. They go to that jazz club, and they're very still much in love. And it's so powerful because it doesn't show, it's not really fantasy. This could have happened. You can see how if they didn't break it off, if Seb didn't make those decisions and made different choices in the relationship, they could have stayed together. But personally, I don't think they could have either achieved their goals together if they stayed together. I think it would have just been one of them would have been successful.
Yeah, and that's why it's like, it's easy to like look back on the past and be like, oh, what if I did that? And what if I did this? So that's what the fantasy is, if things were different and they acted differently in those situations. But the reason why I think it's a fantasy and it would have never happened is because they weren't ready for the relationship back then. Like I said earlier, it wasn't the right time for them. Sometimes people are just not supposed to be together in that moment in their lives. And because if they had been ready, they would have made those decisions, but neither of them were ready for the relationship. That's why those interactions happened those ways. So I don't think it ever would have worked out for them.
And I love the way Chazelle wrote and directed this, because you can see plenty of directors would have just had like they have like a conversation instead of this montage. Maybe after Sebastian gets off stage, her husband like goes to the bathroom and she walks up to them and they're at the bar and they talk about this and they reconcile with dialogue, which I'm sure would have been nice, but it's not as powerful as showing the audience this incredible fantasy and this incredible dream of expressing all the emotions that they're feeling in that moment with visuals instead of, so like show don't tell, show instead of telling, which we talk about a lot in the podcast. Like cut the dialogue, let's just see the feelings.
Yeah. And that's a great point. And it's just that great ending of the last two shots where they look at each other and they both, you can see like there's regret and loss and despair in their eyes. And then Sebastian smiles and then she smiles back. And they acknowledge that they do still love each other, but it just wasn't meant to be. But it's a great ending because they accepted it, being able to accept that it didn't work out and that's life. And then it's that great shot where Emma Stone just turns back and leaves, and then it cuts to black.
Yeah, and they do that nod.
Yeah.
And I love the way Chazelle ends all of his movies because he doesn't let you experience your emotions during the movie. He forces you to experience those emotions as the credits are rolling. He waits until the very end, final shot, boom, now you get to experience everything that you're feeling rather than for like 5 minutes, 10 minutes of a long ending. You get to experience it all. And I love that because it makes you talk about it more. And I'm sure everyone who left the theater like us when we saw it, were like, oh my God, that ending was incredible. Like, why? I can't believe he ended it like that.
Yeah. All three of the movies. Yeah. Same way. And this is a fantastic film. And I mean, I really, as a musical, I really adore it. And they did a great job. The production, directing, the acting, the songs are awesome. And it's just a great film.
Want to do some trivia for both films?
Yeah.
Whiplash was filmed and shot in only 19 days. And during more intense practice scenes, director Chazelle wouldn't yell cut so that Miles Teller would keep drumming until he exhausted himself out. Damien Chazelle couldn't get funding for the movie, so instead he turned it into a short film and submitted it into the Sundance Film Festival in 2013. And it ended up being very successful, winning the Short Film Jury Award, and got funding soon after. And actually, the short film also stars J.K. Simmons as Fletcher. According to composer Justin Hurwitz in La La Land, the piano performances were originally recorded by pianist Randy Kerber during pre-production, but Ryan Gosling spent such an immense amount of time training and learning the music by heart that by the time filming began, Gosling was able to play all the piano sequences seen in the film without the use of hand double or CGI. La La Land, Whiplash, two phenomenal films from a very talented young director, Damien Chazelle. I can't wait to see the rest of his career. Again, we're not giant musical fans, but La La Land's terrific. We love Whiplash. These are great movies. And if you're a fan of Chazelle's movies and you haven't seen First Man, get on that because I think that's his best movie.
Yeah, agreed. They're all three great films. First Man is my favorite as well. But for musical films, these are some of the best made recently.
Thank you for watching Raiders of the Lost podcast. Hit that subscribe button and notification bell. Listen to the audio format of Raiders of the Lost podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and wherever you listen to podcasts. New episodes every Monday and Thursday. Support us on Patreon at patreon.com/Raiders of the Lost podcast.